All right, one of the most high-profile Capitol riot suspects has been released from jail to home custody pending the trial because he didn't know the difference between the White House and the Capitol. Take that in. Douglas Austin Jensen faces 7 charges related to his leading a mob up the stairs on the Capitol. They chased U.S. Capitol Police Officer Eugene Goodman, who ultimately lured them away from the Senate chamber. Cell phone video released yesterday at the request of NBC News and other news outlets shows the chase and Jensen touching the Capitol before breaking in, believing that it is the White House.
This is me touching the White House. This is why we're here. White House. Just so you know.
My God. CNBC reports Jensen's lack of awareness, that's one way to put it, about where he actually was, played a role in the decision Tuesday by a Washington federal court judge to release him after 6 months in jail into home confinement in Iowa. According to court documents, Jensen faces 20 years in prison for the charge of obstructing an official proceeding. Joining us now, Congressman Hakeem Jeffries of New York. He is chairman of the House Democratic Caucus, and I know that you want to talk about the child tax credit, and we will. But first, I must ask you how you are working with Republicans who claim to be pro-law and order, who claim to be pro-cop, and yet they are not even coming close to recognizing what happened on that day.
Well, they continue to be divorced from reality, and it is very troubling that so many of my colleagues on the Republican side of the aisle continue to deny what happened on January 6th. That was a violent assault and attack on the Capitol, the Congress, and the Constitution, undermining the rule of law, while they're perpetrating the big lie and continuing to bend the knee to President or former President Trump. But at the end of the day, Mika, I think what's most important is that as House Democrats, we're going to remain focused on getting things done for the American people, making progress, crushing the virus, providing relief and assistance to everyday Americans who are struggling, and laying the foundation to supercharge our economy. And that's why we were sent to Washington. And that's the mission that we're on. And when we complete that mission, I think the rest will take care of itself politically.
Congressman, it's Willie Geist. Good to have you on the show this morning. Let me ask you about voting rights. It's been front and center, especially with President Biden's speech yesterday in Philadelphia. He did seem to give a nod to perhaps this is going to have to get done at the state level because these big voting rights bills at the federal level don't appear to have enough support. Are you resigned to the fact that it's going to be a state-by-state fight, or you still believe there's something that can be done at a federal level to monitor and to change the way elections are conducted?
I remain committed to making sure that we can try to get H.R. 1, the For the People Act, as well as H.R. 4, the John Robert Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, over the finish line, not simply in the House, but in the Senate. We've had great leadership from Speaker Pelosi in that regard. We all remain committed to protecting our democracy with the fierce urgency of now. And I just simply say, we're not going to walk away from the fact that filibuster reform in the Senate is possible. There are already exceptions to the filibuster that exist right now. Reconciliation is an exception to the filibuster. Republicans used it in 2017 to pass the GOP tax scam, where 83% of the benefits went to the wealthiest 1%, and they saddled us with approximately $2 trillion worth of debt to subsidize the lifestyles of the rich and shameless. That was a filibuster exception. And Mitch McConnell has used the filibuster exception to Supreme Court justices being confirmed to steal not one, but 2 Supreme Court justices, one from President Obama and the other from President Joe Biden. This is extraordinary. And so, of course, there should be a filibuster exception to the Constitution for voting rights, as well as for lifting up our democracy and ensuring that every single American can participate in the great democratic experiment that is the United States of America.
You still have to convince a couple of Democrats, namely Joe Manchin, Kyrsten Sinema, a couple of others, of that argument. They've said they don't want to change the filibuster. The president said yesterday on the question of voting rights that what we're seeing in different states, including in Texas, is a 21st century Jim Crow assault, is the way he put it. That struck some people as extreme language. I don't need to explain to you or many people watching this show what Jim Crow means. Do you believe actually that some of these laws across the country are a return to those times of segregation?
It certainly is a return to a Jim Crow-like mentality. This is a great country. We have come a long way in the United States of America. We still have a long way to go. And part of the reality that we're grappling with is that systemic racism has been in the soil of this country for over 400 years. We are continuing a march toward a more perfect union. In order to get there, one of the things we need to do is to ensure that every American has the right to vote. Listen, Jim Crow may be dead. It was buried with the 1964 Civil Rights Act, the 65 Voting Rights Act, and the Civil Rights Movement. Those things are under assault right now. Jim Crow still has some nieces and nephews that are alive and well.
For sure. Thank you very much for being on with us this morning. Mike Barnicle has the next question.
Congressman, as we've been talking about all day today and yesterday and the day before, there was a fire hose of legislation, potential legislation, being discussed both in the Congress and coming across the president's desk. The reconciliation bill, the $1 trillion bipartisan bill, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But there was a child package that the president pursued the other day, which would give $250 to $300 per week to poor families, poor mothers really, to help raise children who are often in difficulty because of one basic thing, the lack of funds to buy more food, better food, diapers, school supplies, things like that. You know, and I know, and a lot of other people know, that the inevitable onslaught will come from the Republican Party. We've heard it before, that this is waste, it's fraud, it's filled with waste and fraud. What's your rejoinder to that inevitable outcry that will begin?
Well, thank you for that question. Tomorrow is going to be an extraordinary day, Thursday, July 15th, when the child tax credit payments will begin. And they are going to go to middle-class families, working families, and low-income families. This is what is so extraordinary about the implementation of this child tax credit, is that it's going to benefit a wide swath of Americans. And yes, I support the fact that these tax payments are going to lift more than half of the children in America who are currently in poverty out of poverty. We should celebrate that fact, and we will not allow the Republicans to demonize it. At the same time, these child tax credit payments are going to help working families and middle-class families provide a more comfortable living for themselves, most importantly for their children, for their families. It will stabilize neighborhoods and communities. And it's consistent with what President Biden said we were going to do as we emerge from the pandemic, which is to build back better, not go back to pre-pandemic normal, because during pre-pandemic normal, half of the American people reported that they couldn't afford a sudden, unexpected $400 expense. This is the wealthiest country in the history of the world. That's unacceptable. Joe Biden thinks it's unacceptable. House Democrats think it's unacceptable. So do Senate Democrats. That's why we're doing something about it.